Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started with looking at identity in Pacific culture. And so let me actually unpause for you guys. So we had this theme for just a brief second yesterday. And what we're going to do is look at number 219 in your note takers. This is called a Hiapo, and it is a Tapa. So we've already seen some bark cloth or Tapa before. Yesterday, this was the stuff that wrapped the staff god, right? Remember that staff god? Okay. So this is Tapa. Another name for Tapa is just bark cloth. And so that tells you a little bit of what it's made out of, right? It's made out of a tree. And then it has painting on it. Okay, so this is from Niue. It's south of Samoa, right? So it's south of Samoa. And the Samoans actually learned how to do this from missionaries. So this was something that was passed around from island to island, but the island of Samoa that we know actually didn't get it until missionaries brought the tradition, which I find kind of unique. But all the different regions kind of have different styles to their tapa. So who makes tapa and how is it made? We mentioned this yesterday, right? Who makes the tapa? Well, you looked at the staff guide. Women make the tapa. Good. And how is it made? So it is the pounded inner bark of the mulberry tree. So they use mulberry tree. They peel back the harder bark, and it's kind of like that inner bark. Of course, we don't have a lot of trees like this, but it's kind of like, it's like a thin sort of sheets. It's like peeled in a way. Maybe a little bit thicker than like onion skin, that sort of inner bark. And what they basically do is they pound it. It's sort of like leather. They work it so that it becomes soft, so that they can then make it into a softer sort of fabric or material. And there are many uses for this tapa. So we saw it yesterday as the thing that you wrap something with to protect that monarch, right? So it could be made through tapu, right? Through ritual, through song, through oral tradition, right? There could be, a certain process and protocol that you do in order to make it. And it can be used for a number of things. A few years back, when Moana had come out, I could show a clip. I didn't take the time today, but like when she's on the island, she's in the school, there's this stuff is hanging on it. And when they have, when they talk about the god, what was his name? The Rock's character, Maui. They actually do it, when they tell his story a little bit through his tattoos, but also through bark cloth. Okay. So it can be used for bedding, clothing, offering. So we give it, right, for religious purposes. We give it to people of power. It can be wall hanging. It can wrap deities, which we saw yesterday. It can be given at special occasions like weddings, welcomes. We're going to see that with Queen Elizabeth today. Express wealth, excuse me. And it can be exchanged for work, food, or some sort of gift, right? So when I mean exchange, right, I can give tapa to you, and you might help me raise my pig, right? It's kind of like currency. Okay, so here's some of the different examples that you saw in Smart History. If you got a chance to read the article, you can see that there's different kinds of patterns, different kinds of colors. They're all pretty much they're obviously using natural material. Today, when they do it, they might be using some artificial paint, more modern sort of painting techniques, but they have all kinds of examples of how these are made. Our example, it says freehand painting, right? So someone uses a brush to kind of paint this onto the bark cloth, but also you could stamp a pattern on, right? You can make a stamp out of some sort of rubbery substance, a potato, a taro root, right? You can carve it and you can print it. You guys ever do potato stamps when you were little kids at school or at like Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts? No? It's an experience, let me tell you. You'll smell it, right? But you can stamp the patterns, right? So there's different ways to get it. Now, this is some other examples of the kinds of tapa designs that come from this island. Okay, what are some similarities that you see? Go ahead and talk amongst yourselves. What are some similarities that you see in the designs? Okay, what are some of the similarities that we see? What could you write in your form and your content section? Formal elements, yep. It's geometric, right? There are geometric shapes, right? Anything else about besides geometry?
There's like images of plants.
There's images of plants, there's abstractions of plants. There's like leafy-like shapes or floral-like shapes. And especially the floral-like shapes kind of relate to the whole thing as well. Can you see that at least the two on the outside plus our example has radial symmetry, right? Has radial symmetry to it. This one does not, it's more of a linear one, but it does have little elements that have radial symmetry, right? What about the color? What colors dominate their work? What colors? And can you help me? Tan and black. So the natural color of the bark cloth, and then they use tan. So that's a little different than some of these that we saw that are a little bit more like reddish brown or reds added to them. Okay, that's all we have for that one. You might be able to add a little bit more through Khan Academy, but I think that's probably enough. Here's those great VP patterns that you're talking about, Trevor. Okay, so the next one, of course, missing the number again. You think I would just look at this before class started. I was focusing on the content. What is it? 220, number 220. Tamati, Waka, Nene. And it is made by the artist. We have an artist name, look at here. Gottfried Lindauer. And it was painted in 1890. It's oil on canvas. So wow, this is a little bit different, a little outside the scope. I think it's fascinating that they included it into Pacific culture because it's made by a European. But I think once we discuss it, we'll be able to figure it out. But also maybe just by looking at it, right? You probably can say, oh yeah, maybe I get why this is in Pacific culture. Okay. So how does this portrait reflect his heritage? Where is this guy? Tamati, Waka, Nene, where's he from? Did anyone get that from the readings yesterday? Yeah. He's from New Zealand. And he is wearing, right, a traditional cloak made from kiwi feathers, right? So he is wearing a kahu kiwi. So I think if you just know that he's wearing a traditional clothing, that's probably good enough. But if you want to put in what it's called, that is fine too. He's also wearing an earring, and that earring is made from a green stone. And that was a very prestigious object, right? So it would denote rank or significance, right? He's holding a weapon. So this is a staff, and there's the name of that one. So Waka Wa. Okay, and this long club is used for like sparring or in combat, right? It's like a bat. You would hit someone with that end, and it also jab it at someone. It's kind of got a point, right, to it. And that object often has pigeon feathers attached to it as well, or hawk feathers. And then when you look at him, right, besides what he's wearing and holding, he has a moko, right? A moko is that facial tattoo that is common by the Maori, right? He's Maori. Okay. When you have face tattooing in this culture, it denotes who you are. It is very common for people to have a part of a tattoo on their face that denotes their ancestry. But it's not like me and my son are going to have the same tattoo on our face, right? We might have some common elements that say we are a family Matas, but there's going to be something different because each of them are individual. So your facial tattoos are made for you, right? So how do you decide that, right? Your own personal expression, through song, through ritual, through tradition, altering existing sort of designs, right? You have to choose. And of course, he's wearing the full face one. You've probably seen them where they're like isolated to a section of their face, like almost like a beard, like in the lower part of their face, or some parts are still left like untattooed. So it's all personal. Okay, so who is this guy? Why was his painting done, right? He does have his name here, right? So we have his name. So it's not Maori portrait. So his name must be significant in some sort of way. Does anyone know who he was? Who was he to the Maori? Anyone know? Yeah, go ahead, Nicole. I wouldn't say he was a chief. He was a leader. He was a community leader, and he was a successful businessman. So he's from New Zealand, right? He was a son of a famous leader. He was a really good leader himself, but also a good businessman. Eventually, he converted to Wesleyan, which basically is Methodist, right? So Methodist missionaries came in and converted him. And his name, he actually changed his name a little bit. And so Tamati Waka is a form of Thomas Walker, right? Who was an English merchant and patron to a local church, right? So he actually changed his given name to make it more Christian, even though it's still native. Does that make sense? So Tamati Waka is a form of Thomas Walker, right? Probably all you need to know there is he's an important leader, successful business person, right? And converted to Christianity. Okay, so how is this image a reverence of ancestry? We're going to be focusing on how it's used. Does anyone know how a portrait like this could be used? Yeah. For decoration, that's pretty practical. Why would I have a decoration of a person? What would be the significance of a person? Go on. It brings the spirit of the ancestor to the world of the living. And so it records the likeness of an ancestor. It brings their spirit to the world of the living, right? This image is cared for by the family. Now, we have the artist Gottfried Lindauer, but there were other portraits made by other artists and other traditional artists, right? This one just happened to be made from someone from Europe, which we'll talk about in a little bit. These portraits were passed down from generation to generation, so they were cherished, right? They were cherished. Now we'll see this when we look at Korean art too, is that often there's a tradition of having a famous ancestor, right? And you would put it on display in your house in a place of significance. And maybe you would even have like an altar, right? Something that you could go and kind of visit within your house, right? These also could be kept in community centers so that the whole community can pay homage to a deceased ancestor or important member of society. And it's not just decoration, right? What it also does is it has a function to the community. People would cry over it, right? After someone's death, they would cry over it. They might give it offerings or other things of value. They treasure it like it is a living member of their family, right? Because it really is their spirit. Like their mana exists in it, right? Their spirits. Okay. So here's examples of the face tattooing. It's making a comeback in culture, the Maori culture. You will often see business people who work internationally with the mokos on their face. So it's kind of a great tradition that's coming back. Okay, interesting enough, our artist is from Bohemia, which is part of what we consider to be like the Czech Republic today. Basically, he left Bohemia to avoid the draft. He was running from war, and he left for Germany, and then eventually jumped on a boat which was heading to New Zealand. He probably knew it was heading to New Zealand. He was kind of up for an adventure, and he was known for getting commissions to paint prominent members of Maori society. So here's some other examples of his portraits. You can see that they're very similar in what they're wearing, what they're holding. Obviously his style was using oil paint. So these are very traditional, okay? So who were these portraits made for, right? Now we talked about they are revered portraits for people, but he had also another client in mind, right? These paintings were painted for European investors as well. So basically people from Europe would commission or pay for one of these traditional paintings to be made, right? In traditional clothing with the tattooing and whatnot. Why would someone in Europe want a painting that looks like this? Anyone have an idea? It's not their ancestors. And
because I guess it makes them like seem more educated or cultured if they know or like have paintings of a culture that you would only see in like Europe at that time.
exactly, and it's kind of exotic too, isn't it? Like this is the time in history where photography was invented and things like National Geographic kind of take off, and people buy books about exotic places and exotic locations. You know, colonization kind of did that, where people were exposed to things. World fairs were happening where people would learn about other cultures. And so if you were of a certain wealth, you might want something to show I am educated. I know I'm worldly, right? So it makes them seem worldly. Interesting enough, a lot of the Maoris commissioned Lindauer to make portraits that look like this. Isn't that funny? It's not to say he didn't make some of these for Maoris too, But he made things like this. Why would Maoris want to look like this? A little outside of the content, but this is kind of good. Yeah.
Maybe they thought it was like, or it's because.
Right? They're converted to Christianity, right? Which is a Western religion, right? Who's successful in their eyes? Who has the money to come? They come in with all these resources, right? And so to be successful might be to like give away some of your culture and become westernized, right? So often people who are Maori would have these ones done where they would kind of give up their tradition and look like they were Western. Okay, the last piece we have is a contextual image. It is the processional welcoming Queen Elizabeth II to Tonga. And basically what we have here, right, is just a photo of it happening. We don't have an actual picture of the artwork. What number is this again? 223. Right? So when you look at this contextual image, each woman is wearing a tapa, or excuse me, is holding a tapa cloth. Why? Why is each woman wearing a tapa cloth? Knowing that this is called processional welcoming Queen Elizabeth II. Yes. They use tapa to welcome guests, right? To welcome important guests in general, right? So the content of this photo is we have these women who probably made the cloth, and they're basically bringing it in to present to the queen, and we have a bunch of men watching the procession. Okay, this here says Tonga, and for some reason I wrote Fiji, so skip that. Okay, their skirts are painted with geometric designs as well, which is kind of cool, right? They're wearing tapa as clothing, right? So this bark cloth was made by the women. So the function, once again, is its gift. So the gift here is that Queen Elizabeth, when she took upon her throne, right, after her father passed away and she becomes the leader of England, she takes a world tour of her lands, right? And so she goes to all of the different islands. She would have gone to Canada, Australia, all the people who consider her to be their queen. Okay. So while this photo of the matsu is only worn by women and not carried, they're likely there to present to the queen. How does tapa reflect power? I'm sorry. I'm like, why did I have that question? I'm going to delete it. Shortly after the coronation of her, she visited Tonga. They made a tapa cloth. So this was part of a processional that they walked on. So this is another piece. This is not the ones that they were necessarily carried, but you can see that they spent a lot of time and effort to make sure that the queen felt welcome to their territories. Okay. And so the story, or excuse me, the imagery that's embedded in here tells stories. They have similar sort of natural motifs, right? But also there's things embedded in it like royal crowns to signify that it was made for her. So these kinds of tapas were made for her coronation, for her commonwealth for it. Yeah.
Wait, so is it from Tonga or Fiji? Because it says Fiji on here.
On
On the note taker and on the image.
okay, let's look at the first page of the inside the first page there and see what AP says. Because I said that too. I was like, this says Fiji and that said Tonga, so I'm confused too.
Yeah, it says Fiji.
It says Fiji. We're going with Fiji. I'll fix this here. I apologize. this might have been old information. So I copy and paste this from things. There might have been an error initially and I didn't catch it. But that one is the latest one because I updated it based on new resources that I got. So we'll say Fiji. But we do have Tonga here. This is Queen Salome of Tonga. And so she went to a different island. I do want to show a little bit of context. So we're going to watch a little history here. We're not going to watch the whole thing. But I want you to get an idea of how the people of Fiji and Tonga greeted her and what they did for her. And it will kind of relate to things we've talked about before. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video because, and this is probably where we're going to go ahead and end. So I'm going to end the video. But you can watch this video if you're at home.